Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here from Zoobox, and today, for our daily movie review, we're going to be talking about two movies that go by the same name. We're going to talk about Fritz Lang's 1931 masterpiece, M, and then also the almost completely forgotten remake of M from 1951, directed by Joseph Lucy. But we're going to talk about that one on the back end of the video. Let's just talk about this Fritz Lang movie. It's directed by Fritz Lang. It's written by Fritz Lang and his wife at the time, Thea von Harbu. She worked on all of his stuff leading up to this, even like movies he had made previous to this. The movie he made actually right before this, just a few years before this, we talked about maybe a week or so ago, Woman in the Moon. So they've been just partners working together. The big star in this movie, I guess that most people are going to recognize, is Peter Lorre. Peter Lorre was kind of a famous character actor of his time. He was in tons of stuff. The Maltese Falcon, Arsenic and Old Lace. He was in Casablanca. He had like a series where he was a was a Japanese detective, Mr. Moto. I mean, he did a bunch of stuff. A lot of noir stuff, a lot of thrillers. He would always played a lot of villains, a lot of creeps. And some, occasionally do like kind of leading man stuff, but that's like the only real actor anybody is going to recognize, at least that watches these videos. The synopsis on IMDb here is: when the police in a German city are unable to catch a child murderer, other criminals join in the manhunt. So this is, I talked about also another Fritz Lang movie not too long ago. Around the same time I talked about Woman in the Moon, Fury, which was his English language debut. It's after he kind of escapes Nazi Germany and he finally makes his way to America. He makes this movie Fury, which is about social contagion and criminals. And this movie is kind of that movie Fury is kind of the spiritual successor. It's very much in the same vein as what he was trying to accomplish with M. And M really doubles down on it because it takes this really dark concept. This dark concept of the child murderer. Implied that he's also a child molester. And what that does to a society. What that does to a community. And what I really like about M is that it kind of touches on every echelon of that kind of microcosm of culture. Of this small area. It touches on the way it's affecting politics, the police, the citizens, and also the criminals, also the other criminals, the underground. Because as the description implies, the criminals have to start trying to find this guy. And it's not entirely noble. Because the police are looking for this person, they don't know who it is, and things are kind of getting out of hand. People are questioning each other. They're looking at their neighbors. They're threatening each other. Anybody that talks to a kid that may seem a little weird, suddenly a mob will form around them and harass them. So and that's where the whole social contagion thing comes in, and that parallels what happens in the film Fury. If you remember when we talked about Fury, he also similar thing where it starts with rumors, it kind of just spreads out. Suddenly, everybody is a suspect. Everybody could be implicated in what's going on. It does just through whatever prism you're going to see. And Fritz Lang does a great job. He does a great job of just spreading that throughout that first 20, 30 minutes of the movie, where he's just kind of building the world, building some of the characters. I would say this is not very strongly driven as a character piece. It's more of like a intellectual kind of angle. It's a little cold and distant because it is more about the principle. It's more about the point that he's going to be trying to make by the end of the movie. So it doesn't focus on characters so much as it focuses on the message, basically. And if I were to give a criticism to M and Fritz Lang here, it is that it is a little too distant at times. It could have helped the movie if you had some sort of through line, some sort of characters that you felt like you were following all the way through. I think, in fairness to him, I think he was trying to do that with Peter Lorre's character. He's the only Hans Beckert. He's the only guy you get any type of kind of time with, and I think that is kind of the point. So to be fair, I want to be fair. I think Peter Lorre's character, now that I'm thinking about it, that is the point. Is that he's juxtaposing society versus this ne'er-do-well, this miscreant, this dissident, this piece of shit, this damaged person that is out there murdering and maybe molesting kids. He wants to kind of show you what that person's life is like, and not necessarily the victims. It doesn't really give you much time with the victims. You only see the reactions of the victimization. That's the only kind of that's the perspective you get. You don't get really, you see some sad mothers and whatnot, but it's really not so much about them, but it's about how everyone reacts to their trauma, and then also obviously dead kids, right? It's kind of a touchy subject. I don't know if you know any people. I don't know if you know any other human beings, but people tend not to like when you child molesters and whatnot. But the kind of greater purpose of the movie, once we kind of get towards the end of the movie, is that it's about justice. And what is justice, and who should adjudicate justice, and is mob justice righteous, or should this be left in the hands of the police? Because, they end up catching this guy because these criminals are constantly being raided by the police. And they're just like, fuck, we got to get this dude if we want to just go about our business. This is really negatively affecting our ability to, I don't know, have our own crime. Because the police are just throwing the hammer down everywhere. And then they end up catching him, and they end up having kind of this kangaroo court underground somewhere. And he's put up against this jury that is made of his literal peers of the community. And he wants to, well, they kind of have a mock court. Like I said, it's a kangaroo court. Like, they're giving his time to speak and everything, and he gets to kind of explain his circumstance and why he came to be, and why he developed as the kind of man that he developed, and why he became a monster. And they don't really clue you in a ton, other than to say, like, he's a sick man who's got sick compulsions, and he doesn't know how to stop himself. He doesn't know how to help himself, even though he may try. And in the movie does, you get to see him try to stop his compulsions a little bit. Like, he does not necessarily enjoy the experience other than the act of doing it. Like, it's some sort of reprieve from his personal pain. And that's part of his pathology, It doesn't get too much into that stuff, other than Peter Lorre's fantastic monologue. I mean, this was a star-turning monologue. It's in the history books for a reason. You could watch this scene in a vacuum, separate of the movie, and it would still be just as powerful. Peter Lorre really fucking nails it. I mean, he nails the entire performance, but that monologue in particular is incredible. So things to notice about the movie itself. I mean, it's got that great Fritz Lang kind of mannered attention to detail. The stagecraft is excellent. His use of his cinematography and his framing is fantastic. And it's crazy that this comes only a few years after Woman in the Moon, because this feels like a fucking giant leap forward, like an absolute giant leap forward in the art form and his technical ability. I guess, just that. It has like moving cameras, and it's got great uses of dissolves and great just blocking with the characters, and great use of shadows, and a lot of stuff that just almost just like it comes from a different time. And even though like his silent stuff was only a few years before this, it is such a huge leap forward. And every single frame is beautiful. Like, you could take a picture of every frame and like hang it on a wall, and people would look at it like a beautiful piece of art. The lighting, just everything about the cinematography is so well balanced, and everything just knows how to draw your eye perfectly, and you're really invested in not just the actual journey of what's going on, but what makes it interesting is the visual nature of it. It's like how visually arresting it is from just the moment one. And also to note, we really got to talk about this being his first sound movie. Because it really, I don't think he totally knew what to do with it, per se, other than just having people speaking dialogue. But he utilized it like he did it with a special effect. Like, the movie is not wall-to-wall sound. It's not wall-to-wall score. It's very specific. It's very specific where it uses sound. Even things like footsteps. Like, they're not always there. But when he wants to get your attention, that's when he uses it. When he wants to kind of up the tension quotient, or he wants to um, pull your feelings in a certain direction. Like a person, like people would use a piece of film score to kind of manipulate your emotions. He does that just through the sound design. And there's this great, because Peter Lorre's like whistling this. Oh my god, the name is escaping me. This famous kind of like little tune, and he uses it so well. Like just this little creepy foreshadowing thing that like when Peter Lorre's character Hans Becker's like in the mood to kill a kid, he starts whistling this song, and it ends up being kind of this creepy manifesto of the character. Um, and also, like I said, just the use of the sound design and when he does and doesn't use it is all feels pointed. It's all just to build something, to push the audience in a direction in terms of their emotions, and it's masterfully done. It's masterfully done, because I had watched another movie that was made during this transition period between silent and sound film, Carl Theodor Dreyer's Vampire, and I liked that movie just fine. But that movie did not have a great sort of understanding of sound and what to do with it and how to utilize it effectively, because Vampire, for all intents and purposes, is more like a silent film with some sound, with some with some dialogue, because it even still has intertitles and stuff like that. Like Vampire feels much more. I mean, I think Vampire is made like a year or so before this, so gotta be fair to Carl Theodor Dreyer, who I think is a great director. But Fritz Lang, I think when he's thinking about it, not necessarily as like just another component of the film, but thinking of it as kind of this special effect, I think actually helped him conceptualize what you could do with sound in a story, in a visual story, and how that could facilitate the intentions and the tone of the piece. Whereas I think maybe Carl Theodor Dreyer just didn't have quite a good enough handle on it. And it's funny because just like all movies from this era, there's just been a bunch of different versions of this, and they didn't actually have like a complete version of M in the modern era until like the mid 90s. I think maybe 2000 it premiered, because it was lost. It was kind of lost to time for a little while, and then they made different versions of the film, and because when you made the transition from from silent to sound, they had to, like, for international stuff, they would literally go in and dub stuff, but they would actually go in and reshoot stuff. Not with Fritz Lang either. So they would re-edit the movies, they would dub the movies, they would reshoot stuff. Famously, there's like 3 different versions of Peter Lorre's like final performance. The one that I saw was he did the French version, where Peter Lorre came in and spoke in French, and they did some sort of facsimile of the set, but the lighting is all different and it's not shot the same. The performance is still great, but definitely different. So the actual complete version of M is only like available recently. The closest is they can come to as complete. I think when it premiered, if my memory serves me correct, when I was reading the kind of the background info, I think it was almost 2 hours, and this one comes in at about an hour 50. The Criterion release, I have the Criterion cut of the movie, which is totally worth picking up, and it's a great transfer. And it's got some great special features. It has this great like interview with Fritz Lang by William Friedkin like a year before he died. It's got this little documentary about the restoration process and the different versions of the movie. It's got a commentary by a couple film historians that I was listening to. I fell asleep last night. Super entertaining, super good. If you've never seen Fritz Lang's M, if I were to suggest a movie from the Fritz Lang movies that I have seen, I would probably recommend M. I would recommend M over Metropolis, say. Especially if you're talking more of a general movie viewer. Because recommending silent films to people, the only silent film I've seen that I would probably like recommend that like anybody could watch and anybody could like find powerful and enjoy recently anyways is Carl Theodor Dreyer's The Passion of Joan of Arc. That one I think transcends the silent film medium, because most people I think would reflexively say like, oh, you should watch Metropolis. No, I think you should watch M. M is like kind of the godfather of the thriller, which is something, you know, Lang had a history with. He did a Dr. Mabusa, the Gambler. That's kind of an espionage thriller, very early nascent version, which I haven't finished. I'm going to do a video about that when I finish it, but it's like 5 hours long. So I haven't got through the whole thing yet. But so he had already kind of established, I don't know, his tone and style with that kind of thing. And this is like full fruition. A lot of people would say this is Fritz Lang's masterpiece. It is well worth your time. But before we go, I want to give a little shout out and talk a little bit about the remake in 1951. So this was actually mounted by the producer that mounted the original 1931 version, and he wanted to Americanize it. He came over when Fritz Lang came over to just escaping the Nazis, and he became a movie producer in America. And he hired these two people, Norman Riley Rain and Leo Katcher, to come and redo the script and Americanize it, and I don't know, maybe make it a little bit more accessible to American audiences. And they offered it to Fritz Lang, and Fritz Lang was offended. Fritz Lang thought M was kind of his magnum opus, it's his best movie, so he didn't want to do it. So they ended up hiring this guy, Joseph Lucy, who was kind of or Losey rather, an up-and-coming talent of the time. He had done a lot of kind of things about social commentary. He had progressive politics. He was a communist, basically. He had communist sympathies, I suppose you could say. So he kind of gets blacklisted for a little while after this movie gets made. So that's one of the reasons why it's so forgotten. Because I watched it today for the first time. I had never seen it. I've seen M maybe like 3 or 4 times, maybe 5 times actually, and I'd never seen this version. I couldn't find it anywhere on streaming, but you know where I did find it? It's on YouTube. Go look up on YouTube. You can watch the 1951 version of M on YouTube. And what did I think of it? I actually thought it was pretty good. I don't think it needs to exist. It's kind of reminded me a little bit of Matt Reeves' Let Me In, which is the English remake of Let the Right One In, that movie about the child vampires, if you've ever seen that. It's one of those ones where you're like, well, this is really well made. This has got some great performances in it, but it doesn't really do a ton to add to the story or change things, because it is mostly the same movie. I think what was interesting about this movie was the performance of David Wayne, who basically takes Peter Lorre's place as the child killer. And in this one, it's trying to like kind of hold a mirror up to society in this one, kind of, because you know the original M is more about just the nature of mob justice and who gets to adjudicate justice, and is the mob, is that a good thing? Is that a righteous thing? Just because like somebody is an awful person, if we don't like live by our standards and our principles, like going against that to murder somebody who is a murderer does not necessarily make our children come back. It's not going to fix what has happened. So why commit another vice or sin in service of kind of nothing other than this kind of hollow pursuit of revenge? That's what M is about. And this one, it's more about the idea that society has created this person, and we should be looking at the real murderers and the real people that create a culture where people like this are created. Because he goes into the spiel at the end during his monologue, which is actually very good. It's very well performed, about how basically his mother's kind of abuse. He was abused as a child, and his mother kind of turns him into a monster, you know, throughout the years through this abuse, and he becomes kind of masochistic, and he has this thing where he wants to protect children because they're innocent, and he doesn't think children should deserve to live in the evil world of men because men are evil. And he gets kind of a monologue, and in this one the lawyer has a little bit bigger of a part. They tried to like make some more characters in this one that you could kind of follow from the beginning to the end of the story. They feel a little bit more connected. It feels like very much like trying to give the audience something to kind of grab onto in a more clear sense of kind of heroes and villains. And then it does kind of throw a wrench in that at the end. And it's an interesting kind of twist on it. So it's not exactly the same. But I think it's really well directed. If I had never seen M, the original M, I would have loved this movie. And not to say that I didn't enjoy it, but I just know what it's pulling from, so it's just kind of like, you know, you measure yourself when you think about how much you like or dislike it. And I think Joseph Losey, I keep wanting to say Lucy, it's Losey, does a really great job as a director. Makes a great noir movie, and a good thriller. And he cast it very well, and it's got great performances, and it's worth checking out. Like even if you've never seen M, it's on YouTube. And I'll try to remember to leave a link to it in the description, to the YouTube version, because it'd be worth checking out. Honestly, I'd be interested to hear what somebody's opinion on this movie is if they'd never seen M. You know, I'm very curious, because I feel like most people, if you're a fan of thrillers or film noir, like, you would like M. You would like the remake, because it's very well executed. And like I said, it really just kind of got thrown by the wayside because of McCarthy era politics, which, justified or not, I don't know. But I love this thing for the years. Just a little side tangent about McCarthyism, which I'm not in any way shape like supporting the way they went about that or anything. But for years they would be like, no, it was the Red Scare, it was paranoia, there was no communists, nobody was doing all this stuff. Like, all of these measures were kind of overblown. Only nowadays, in the past 10 years, they've been like, no, there were tons of communists, and then now we celebrate them as heroes. You should go check out the movie Trumbo. Yeah, it's really funny. It's funny in the sense of, like, now it's just they've completely gone back on it and be like, well, no, they were communists, but they were just heroes. They were like martyrs. They couldn't make movies anymore. That was their they couldn't be rich filmmakers anymore. I'm sure they could have gotten a fucking job at the flipping burgers at whatever restaurant, soda pop jerk. They could have done all those things. You know what I'm saying? Sorry, everybody. Corona's getting to me. It's making me lose it. Good old coronavirus. Well, I got to sit around and watch these old movies. So that's my silver lining, being sick. Just kind of get to watch a bunch of old movies that I normally just don't get a chance to, want to go revisit some things. It's a great time to do it when you're sick and you're kind of in bed watching old German movies and their remakes. Great time. Chicken soup for the soul, you might say. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox, there's a bunch of links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, for my personal Twitter. Also, if you'd like to make a suggestion for one of these daily videos or maybe something for the big show, Zoobox Goes to the Movies, which we got our most recent episode is already out. Platoon. Check it out. Next up, after that, will be David Cronenberg's Scanners. Some fun episodes. Go check them out. And, yeah. And we'll talk to you later. So leave something in the comments. Give us a thumbs up. Smash that like button.